Hello and welcome to this video. The topic for our discussion today is science fiction, which is colloquially known as sci-fi. Sci-fi or science fiction is a broad genre of fiction that focuses on existing or future scientific inventions. It focuses on technological theories and the speculations around those theories and scientific inventions. While the coining of the term science fiction is usually attributed to American publisher Hugo Gernsback, but actually the founder of this genre of writing science fiction is Victorian author H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells is quite popular for writing science fiction and social and sociological fiction. And one of the most popular of his works, which you might have heard about, is The Time Machine. And then he has also written The Invisible Man, The War of the World, and The First Man on the Moon. So these are some of the popular works of H.G. Wells, the man who is credited for initiating this era of fiction. Basically, science fiction deals with the thrilling stories of scientific marvels, scientific wonders, and the stories are designed to show the potential of science. And some of these stories are based on familiar fact, such as aerial warfare and men on the moon. Like you have movies like First to the Moon, Apollo, or The Dish. So, in theory, nothing is impossible in scientific fiction. For example, in The Time Machine, you have a machine which has the capacity to transport you in a different world altogether. And the time machine is pictured as a sort of motorbike on which you could travel back to the past and forward into the future. See, it's practically not possible in reality, but in the movie it is so. So in the novel it can happen. It's quite possible. So you can say science fiction is a writing style which combines science and fiction, and it evolved as a response to fantasy. Mary Shelley's popular writing, Frankenstein, is a classic example of sci-fi thriller. So Mary Shelley used a scientific rationale. She combined with certain religious ideas to convince the reader that a story was possible, but it touched upon the improbable. So time travels are possible in sci-fi thrillers, and there can be aliens, there can be spaceships, and often there are cool machines like robots are there. And even it's possible to set the story in the far or immediate future, or it could be set in an alien world or an alternate universe altogether. And it might even contain time travel into the past or future, the way we have it in The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. And it can also include changes to man brought about by science. And all the characters behave like real human beings with real emotions and problems in science fictions to make it a realistic, to give it a realistic appeal. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was the first novel in English to deal with the possibility that science can create a monster that can destroy science and possibly mankind too. Mary Shelley did not wish the story to be considered supernatural. She made the main character a scientist, and his scientific efforts were highlighted by Mary Shelley in the novel. The mood of the novel is a tale of terror. In plot, a laboratory experiment which went wrong. The blend of Gothic materials and science in this novel brought the tale of terror clearly into the stream of science fiction, and it also gave it a more credible base. The sci-fi writers take scientific possibilities and they develop them step by step from non-data to form a story. Science fiction is quite entertaining and it makes the audience wonder what if a particular thing happens in science. And you can say that it also encourages creativity in writing, and it helps in role playing. It introduces the students to a new literary genre, and we get acquainted with the value and the dangers of advanced technology and how we need to balance the pros and cons of science. It also enhances our imagination when we read a sci fi work. The popularity of science fiction has increased manifold over the years, and in fact, there are so very many novels and there are so very many movies based on science fiction, and it's now divided into subgenres. Like we have steampunk novels, we have time travels, and then we have alternate history or dystopic fiction, which are some of the subgenres of the main category, that is science fiction. Steampunk is a subgenre of science fiction that incorporates technology and aesthetic designs inspired by 19th century industrial steam powered machinery. While dystopian fiction is opposite of utopian novels or utopian fiction, that utopian fiction is about everything which is perfect, which depicts a perfect society, which talks about something which is perfect, far from any flaws, far from any miseries. While dystopia talks about an imagined community or society that is dehumanizing, that is frightening, maybe frightening because of the advancement of science taken negatively, advancement of science which works as a destructive force coupled with negativity. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley is probably one of the finest examples of dystopian fiction, which talks about a society that is dehumanizing, as I just talked about. Just read this novel if you find time. It's not that thick, and it's quite interesting. And it has so very many elements of sci-fi. It has almost all the major elements of science fiction, and has an interesting story which would appeal to you, which would appeal to you because of its dehumanizing science forces, which Huxley talks about in the novel. You can also read Time Machine by H.G. Wells, which is again quite popular, and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein too is an interesting fiction. I think if you read these three novels, science fiction will be clear to you. Well, that's all for today, and we will discuss some other important literary terms in our next video. Thank you so much for joining me.